9 ugly things you do as you get older without realizing it that 99% of older people don't know about. Aging isn't just about wrinkles and gray hair, it's about how we carry ourselves, how we treat others, and how we engage with the world. And yet, many of us unknowingly develop habits that make us seem older in a way that isn't wise or dignified, but disconnected, difficult, or even off-putting. The worst part? Most of us don't even realize we're doing it. It's the way we speak, the way we react to change, or the way we hold on to the past. These small, unnoticed patterns can slowly push people away, drain our self-confidence, and create an invisible wall between us and the world around us. But here's the good news. These habits aren't set in stone. Once you recognize them, you can start shifting the way you present yourself, so that you're not just growing older, but growing wiser, respected, and deeply connected. Today we're revealing 9 hidden habits that may be aging you in ways you never expected, and how a few simple changes can help you age with confidence, dignity, and influence. Let's dive in. 1. Talking too much about yourself. The great philosopher Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." The wisdom of this simple statement has been echoed across centuries, yet it is a lesson that many of us forget as we grow older. Consider Socrates, who was known for his ability to guide conversations through questions rather than monologues. Unlike the self-important men of Athens who sought only to display their knowledge, Socrates listened. He understood that true wisdom is not in speaking endlessly but in drawing out the insights of others, and for this he was beloved and respected, not because he proclaimed his own experiences but because he made others feel heard. Yet today, how often do we forget this? I remember a time when I was much younger, too young to know better but just old enough to believe I knew it all. I had gathered with a group of friends and family at a holiday dinner, eager to share my thoughts on the world. That night I spoke about everything: my career, my struggles, my opinions on politics, the lessons I had learned. I didn't realize it at the time, but no one else was really talking. They nodded, smiled, and responded politely, but I was holding the floor, and I had no intention of giving it up. Then, my grandmother, an old woman with a quiet grace, placed her hand on mine and said, "You are full of wisdom, my dear, but when was the last time you learned something new?" The room fell silent. I was taken aback, confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. She smiled, sipping her tea. "You've been speaking all night, but if you are always the one talking, who is left to teach you?" It stung a little, but as I glanced around the table, I noticed something for the first time. Faces that seemed disengaged, eyes that flickered with boredom. It was a painful realization. I had mistaken my own voice for wisdom when, in truth, I had silenced the wisdom of others. Years passed, and life humbled me. I grew older, and with age came losses, friends, family, and the luxury of time. Conversations became more precious, and I began to notice something else. Many older people, like myself, had a tendency to take over discussions. We tell stories from decades ago, reliving moments that shaped us, thinking that by doing so we are sharing something valuable. And sometimes we are, but too often, we don't notice what's happening on the other side. Young people who feel unheard, friends who stop calling, family members who nod but don't engage. One day I was sitting in a park, observing an elderly man speaking to his teenage grandson. The old man was in full lecture mode, recounting a story about how things used to be, while the boy quietly looked at his phone, disengaged. The moment stung. I saw myself in that man, and I saw the missed opportunity, a chance for connection, wasted by one-sided conversation. From that day forward I made a conscious effort to listen, not just to hear, but to truly listen. When my grandson spoke about his interests, I asked questions instead of offering unsolicited advice. When a friend confided in me, I resisted the urge to one-up their story with one of my own, and something remarkable happened. People opened up to me in ways they never had before. Conversations deepened, my relationships grew richer, and I discovered something unexpected. By listening, I wasn't losing my voice, I was amplifying it in the most meaningful way possible. I had finally learned what my grandmother tried to teach me all those years ago. People don't remember how much you talked. They remember how you made them feel. I wonder, how often do we make the mistake of assuming that talking makes us wise? Have you ever caught yourself dominating a conversation without realizing it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think people today struggle to listen more than they used to? Or has it always been this way? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'm listening. 2. Bragging without realizing it. Lao Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher, once said, "He who stands on tiptoe does not stand firm, he who brags does not endure." The wise men of old understood that boasting is not a sign of strength, it is a symptom of insecurity. The more we feel the need to prove our worth, the more we reveal our own doubts about it. True greatness does not announce itself, it simply exists, steady and undeniable, like a mountain standing tall without needing to declare its height. And yet, in our desire to be acknowledged, we sometimes forget this truth. I once had a friend named Robert. He was a man of quiet dignity in his youth, but as he aged, something changed. Each time we met, his conversations followed the same pattern. "My son just got promoted again," he would say with a satisfied smile. "Vice president of the whole division now. And my granddaughter? She's already in the top of her class, probably heading to Harvard." At first we all listened politely, but as time went on, I noticed a shift. People began to avoid sitting next to Robert at gatherings. Conversations would drift away from him. No one wanted to hear another long-winded speech about his family's success. One evening we were at a small dinner party when an old friend, Martha, finally spoke up. She had recently lost her daughter to cancer. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Robert, do you ever stop to ask how the rest of us are doing?" she said, her eyes heavy with sadness. The room fell silent. Robert looked startled. "Well, I like to share good news." Martha nodded. "I understand that, but sometimes when life isn't so kind to others, hearing about your endless successes makes it feel even harder." I watched Robert's face shift from confusion to something deeper. Realization, maybe even shame. He had spent years thinking that by speaking of his family's achievements, he was inspiring admiration, but instead, he had unintentionally distanced himself from the very people who once valued his friendship. After that night, Robert withdrew for a while. When he returned to our gatherings, he was different. He still spoke of his family, but something had changed in the way he did it. Instead of, "My son just got another promotion," he would say, "I've learned a lot about patience as a father. Watching my children navigate their careers has taught me the importance of listening more and advising less." Instead of, "My granddaughter is at the top of her class," he would say, "Raising kids today is different than it was in our time, isn't it? I admire how hard they work." The change was subtle but profound. He was no longer speaking to impress, he was speaking to connect, and in doing so people began listening again. As I sit here today, thinking about Robert's story, I wonder how often we all fall into this trap. In a world obsessed with achievements, social media highlights, and status symbols, it's easy to think that our worth is tied to what we can prove to others. But the truth is, the people who command the most respect are not those who constantly remind others of their success. They are the ones who inspire through humility. Have you ever felt that someone's constant bragging made it hard to connect with them? Or have you caught yourself focusing too much on achievements rather than deeper lessons? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think our society places too much value on status and success? How can we shift toward more meaningful conversations? Share your experiences in the comments. I'm listening. 3. Judging too quickly. Confucius once said, "Do not judge others by your own standards, for everyone is making their way through life as best they can." There's an old story from ancient China about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors pitied him, saying it was terrible luck, but the farmer simply replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." The next day, the horse returned with a wild stallion. The neighbors rejoiced, calling it good fortune. Again the farmer said, "Maybe so, maybe not." Later, the farmer's son broke his leg while trying to tame the stallion. The neighbors mourned his misfortune. "Maybe so, maybe not," the farmer said again. Days later, the army came to recruit young men for war, but they left his injured son behind. The lesson? We often judge too quickly, assuming we understand a situation when, in truth, we only see part of the story. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when I first saw him. A man in ragged clothes sat hunched over on a park bench, staring at the ground. People walked past him, some giving him sideways glances, others pretending not to see him at all. I'll admit it, I judged him too. Probably homeless, probably an addict, probably made some bad choices. The thoughts came quickly, as they often do. I sat down on the other end of the bench, watching as people crossed the street rather than walk too close to him. Then, a little girl, no older than 6, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why is that man sad?" The mother whispered something to the child and hurried her along, but the girl resisted, waving at the man before skipping away. And for the first time, the man looked up. His face wasn't what I expected. He wasn't angry or vacant, he was just tired, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with his clothes. I don't know what made me do it, but I turned to him and said, "Cold day, huh?" He chuckled, a sound rough from disuse. "Better than yesterday." That was the start of a conversation I'll never forget. His name was Peter. He had once been a teacher, married with 2 children. Then, life happened. His wife died in a car accident. He turned to alcohol, lost his job, then his home. His children, grown now, stopped speaking to him. "I became someone they couldn't recognize," he admitted. "Maybe someone I don't recognize either." I sat there, humbled. How wrong I had been. I had assumed he was just another man who had made poor choices, but the truth was more complicated. Life had dealt him blows that I couldn't even imagine, and yet, despite everything, he smiled when he spoke of his children. He still hoped to rebuild, to find a way back to them. When I finally got up to leave, I shook his hand. "I hope they see you again soon," I said. His grip was strong. "I hope so too." I walked away with something heavy on my heart. How often had I judged someone before knowing their story? How many times had I dismissed a person based on appearance, on assumptions? It's easy to believe we understand people at a glance, but the truth is, we never really know what someone has been through until we listen. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to realize later that you were wrong? Have you ever been judged unfairly? I'd love to hear your thoughts. How can we become better at seeing people for who they truly are? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'm listening. 4. Neglecting your appearance. Confucius once said, "Respect yourself and others will respect you." In ancient Rome, even the wisest of philosophers, such as Seneca, understood that how we present ourselves influences how we feel and how the world sees us. The great statesmen of the time were not admired merely for their words, but for their discipline in all aspects of life, including their appearance. They believed that maintaining one's dignity, through both conduct and personal care, was a reflection of one's inner strength. And yet today, so many people let themselves go, not out of laziness, but out of a quiet surrender to time. I once had a friend named Eleanor. She was the most vibrant woman I had ever known, always dressed in bold colors, always with her hair done just right. She wasn't trying to look younger, she was simply a woman who took pride in herself. But then, life changed. Her husband of 40 years passed away. Grief consumed her, and bit by bit she stopped caring. First, she skipped her regular hair appointments, then the bright colors in her closet gave way to dull, shapeless clothes. One day I went to visit her, and I barely recognized the woman who answered the door. She smiled weakly, but her eyes held no light. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said when I asked how she was doing. "Who am I dressing up for?" That question haunted me. Over the weeks, I watched as her withdrawal from life deepened. She rarely went out, she turned down invitations. People stopped coming by, not because they didn't care, but because she no longer invited the world in. Then one day I showed up at her door with an old photo album. I flipped through pages of our younger years, trips we had taken, places we had been, and I saw her staring at a picture of herself from long ago, dressed in a deep red dress, smiling with such warmth. "I miss her," she whispered. I placed my hand over hers. "She's still here, Eleanor, but you have to let her see the world again." That afternoon we went out, just to the salon, nothing more. I watched as the hairdresser trimmed away months of neglect, shaping her hair the way she used to wear it. And as she looked in the mirror, something changed. A small spark of recognition. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly she returned. She started wearing her favorite scarves again. She went back to church, started meeting friends for coffee, and one day she told me something that has stayed with me ever since. When I stopped looking like myself, I stopped feeling like myself. And when I stopped feeling like myself, I stopped living. You don't need to chase youth to maintain dignity, but caring for your appearance isn't vanity, it's self-respect. It's telling yourself, and the world, I still matter. And that is the difference between merely aging and truly living. Have you ever seen someone give up on themselves? Or have you ever felt like you were fading into the background? Let's talk about it. What small things do you do to maintain your sense of self? Share in the comments, I'd love to hear. 5. Expecting respect without earning it. The philosopher Cicero once said, "The authority of those who teach is often an obstacle to those who want to learn." In ancient China, an aging scholar visited a young emperor, expecting automatic deference. Instead, the emperor asked, "What can you teach me that life has not?" The scholar scoffed, feeling insulted. Was his age not proof of wisdom? But as the emperor listened patiently, the scholar realized something humbling. Respect was not granted by years alone, but by the willingness to still learn, to still share, and to still see the world through the eyes of others. And so, he began to listen. I grew up in a time when respect for elders was unquestioned. A boy wouldn't dare challenge his grandfather, a young woman wouldn't correct an older man. Back then, respect was given freely simply because of age, but times have changed. I learned this the hard way when my grandson Luke came to visit one summer. He was in college, sharp, opinionated, and, to my frustration, not particularly deferential. At the dinner table one evening I found myself ranting about kids these days. Back in my day we worked hard. We didn't question our elders, we knew our place. Luke set down his fork and looked me in the eye. "Grandpa, did you respect your elders because you were told to or because they earned it?" The question struck me like a slap. I puffed up, ready to defend myself, but the truth gnawed at me. Had I respected my father because I was forced to, or because he was a man of integrity, wisdom, and fairness? I swallowed my pride and asked, "What do you mean?" Luke leaned forward. "I respect you, Grandpa, not because you're older, but because of the stories you've told me, the lessons you've shared. But some people think they deserve respect just for being born first. Respect isn't a birthright, it's earned." His words sat with me long after he left. Over the next few months, I started noticing something. At the store, I saw elderly men barking orders at cashiers. At the park, I heard older folks complaining about lazy young people. And at family gatherings, I watched as some of my peers spoke at young people but never with them. It dawned on me, was it possible that we, the elders, had forgotten how to give respect? We demanded patience, but how often did we show it? We insisted on being heard, but how often did we listen? So I decided to try something new. At the next family gathering, I asked my grandson about his studies, really listening instead of waiting for my turn to speak. I didn't lecture, I asked questions. And the strangest thing happened. For the first time in years, I felt like we weren't just talking at each other, we were talking with each other. Respect had stopped being a demand, it had become a bridge. I used to think that growing older automatically meant I deserved deference, at the context of sleep. But I've come to see that respect isn't a one-way street. The best way to receive it? Give it first. Have you ever experienced a moment where respect had to be earned rather than expected? Do you think our society has changed for better or worse when it comes to respecting elders? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'm listening. 6. Holding on to grudges. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." There's a story from ancient Japan about two monks who were traveling together. Along their journey they came across a woman struggling to cross a river. One monk immediately lifted her and carried her to the other side. Hours later, as they continued walking, the second monk angrily said, "We are not supposed to touch women. How could you break the rules?" The first monk simply smiled and replied, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The lesson is clear. Grudges weigh us down long after the moment has passed. I had a brother once. His name was Thomas, and when we were young, we were inseparable. We built forts in the backyard, whispered secrets under the covers at night, and swore we'd always have each other's backs. But then life happened. There was a fight, something about money, something about our parents' house. The details blur now, but the anger, that stayed sharp. He said things, I said worse. And just like that, 30 years slipped by. For 3 decades we lived in the same city, passed by the same places, yet never spoke a word. Each year the bitterness became a heavier weight. And for what? One day I got the call. Thomas had passed away, a heart attack, sudden and merciless. I stood at his funeral, surrounded by people who had known him in ways I never did. I saw pictures of him holding his grandchildren, celebrating birthdays I had never attended. And it hit me. I had spent more time being angry at him than I had loving him. I had let my pride steal 30 years as they lowered his casket into the ground. I wanted to scream, to take it all back, to say I was sorry, but there was no one left to hear it. It's easy to hold on to anger. It makes us feel righteous, justified. We tell ourselves, they should apologize first. We wait for time to heal wounds, but time does nothing when the heart refuses to soften. I learned too late that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself. If I could go back, I'd pick up the phone. I'd let go of my pride. I'd remind myself that no argument, no mistake, no betrayal is worth losing a lifetime of love. Hula Cole Axla Simone. Is there someone in your life you've stopped speaking to? A grudge that's been sitting in your heart, waiting for an apology that may never come? I challenge you, before it's too late, reach out. What are your thoughts on forgiveness? Have you ever let go of a grudge and felt the weight lift? Share your story in the comments. I'm listening. 7. Resisting change. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, once said, "Change is the only constant in life." In ancient China, a river was often used as a symbol of wisdom. A man standing in the same river twice is never standing in the same water. The current moves, the landscape shifts, and life continues. Those who refuse to move with it, who cling to old ways as the water rushes past, are left standing still while the world changes around them. Resisting change is like trying to hold back the tide, but those who learn to swim with it find new shores. I remember the first time I heard about the internet. My grandson Ben was raving about it, eyes wide with excitement. "Grandma, it's amazing. You can talk to people across the world, find any information in seconds." I waved him off. "Bah, nonsense. What's wrong with writing a letter?" he laughed, shaking his head. "You'll see." And I did, just not in the way I expected. The world moved forward, and I stood still. Over the years, I resisted every new thing that came my way. Smartphones, useless. Social media, a waste of time. Video calls, why not just visit in person? But then, life caught up with me. My best friend Irene moved across the country to be with her daughter. My knees weren't what they used to be, so I couldn't travel like I once did. Family gatherings became rare, and slowly, I found myself alone more often than not. One day, I called my grandson. "Ben, I think I made a mistake." He didn't say "I told you so." Instead, he showed up at my house the next day, tablet in hand. "Let's start small, Grandma." I resisted at first. My hands fumbled over the screen, I clicked the wrong things, got frustrated. But then something wonderful happened. With a few taps, Ben pulled up a video call, and there on the screen was Irene. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, laughing. "You did it!" I hadn't seen her face in years. We spoke for an hour that day, and when the call ended, I wiped away a tear. I had been wrong. From that moment on, I embraced change in small ways. I learned to text, to send pictures, to watch videos of my great-grandkids, even when I couldn't be there. I started reading online, discovering stories and ideas I never would have found otherwise. And I realized something. The world had never left me behind. I had been the one who refused to move forward. Looking back, I see how foolish my resistance was. Change isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. It doesn't mean losing who you are, it means growing into who you can become. I may not understand every new thing, but I don't want to be left standing still while the river of life keeps flowing. Have you ever resisted change, only to realize later that you had been holding yourself back? What's one thing you've learned to embrace that made your life better? Let's talk in the comments. I'm listening. 8. Avoiding emotional vulnerability. Lao Tzu once said, "Water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. What is soft is strong." In the samurai traditions of old Japan, warriors were taught to show no emotion, to remain stoic in the face of loss. But there is a lesser-known story of a great samurai who, after losing his brother in battle, openly wept before his men. When asked why he showed such weakness, he replied, "Weakness is hiding what is true. Strength is bearing the weight of sorrow without fear. It is not hiding our emotions that makes us strong, it is having the courage to express them. There was a man I once loved more than life itself. His name was James, my husband, my partner in everything, the one who made my world feel steady. He was not a man of many words, but his love showed in the quiet ways, the way he refilled my coffee before I even asked, the way he placed his hand on the small of my back when we crossed the street, the way he let me warm my cold feet against his under the blankets on winter nights. And I loved him just as fiercely, but I never told him, not the way I should have. We were a generation that didn't speak of feelings so freely. We showed love in duty, in provision, in presence. We believed in action, not words. And so the years passed, filled with little moments of care but few moments of true vulnerability. Then one day he was gone. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. One moment he was reading the newspaper, the next I was standing alone in a quiet house, surrounded by all the words I never said. I sat in the dark that night, clutching one of his old sweaters, breathing in the last of his scent, and for the first time in years, I sobbed without holding back. It hit me like a wave, the regret, the longing, the unbearable truth that he had never really heard the words I had carried in my heart all this time, I love you. 3 words that had sat in my throat for decades, now spilling out into an empty room. It took me years to understand why I had held back. Fear of looking weak, fear of saying too much, fear of opening my heart too wide and finding nothing in return. And yet, what had that fear given me? Nothing but regrets. So I made a promise to myself, I would never again let fear keep me from speaking my heart. I started telling my children I love you, not just in passing but in full, direct, unshakable truth. I told my friends how much they meant to me. I let myself cry when I needed to, laugh without holding back, and say I miss you when I felt the ache of absence. And do you know what happened? The world softened. My relationships deepened. The people I loved felt closer, not further. I had spent a lifetime guarding my emotions, thinking it made me strong. But I had been wrong. True strength isn't in silence. True strength is in letting yourself be seen. Have you ever held back your emotions out of fear? Or have you ever regretted not saying something when you had the chance? Let's talk in the comments. What's one thing you wish you had said to someone you loved? I'm listening. 9. Living in the past. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once wrote, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, but concentrate the mind on the present moment." In ancient Persia, there was a wise king who ordered a ring to be made with an inscription that would guide him in both good times and bad. The inscription read, "This too shall pass." When he was victorious, it reminded him that success was fleeting, and when he suffered loss, it reminded him that sorrow would not last forever. The lesson is simple. The past is a place to visit, but not to live in. I had an old friend named Walter. If you ever met him, you'd think he was still living in 1965. His stories were always the same, about the glory days, his youth, his triumphs. Back in my day, he'd say, his voice full of nostalgia, things were better. The music, the people, the world itself. It didn't matter what was happening around him, he refused to move forward. He ignored new technology, dismissed modern ideas, and resisted change. He clung to the past like an old coat, convinced that nothing ahead could ever be as good as what had already been. For years I admired Walter. He had lived a life worth remembering. But over time something changed. The world kept moving and he did not. Friends invited him to gatherings, but he rarely came. "It's not like it used to be," he'd say. His children bought him a smartphone so he could video call his grandkids, but he never learned to use it. "What's wrong with a good old-fashioned letter?" he'd grumble. And then one day I got the call. Walter had passed away. At his funeral I realized something heartbreaking. The world he had loved so much had moved on without him, and he had spent his final years stuck in a time that no longer existed. Walter's story haunts me, because I see his mistake in so many others, and sometimes in myself. It's easy to get caught in the past, to believe that what we had before was the best we'll ever have. But the truth is, life is still happening. There are new friendships to be made, new experiences waiting, new lessons to learn. And yet, so many of us let the past steal the present. I decided I wouldn't let that happen to me, So I said yes when my granddaughter invited me to a dance class. I learned how to use a smartphone, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see the faces of the people I love. I started listening to new music, trying new foods, and letting myself embrace what's still ahead. And you know what? I found joy, not in reliving the past, but in making the most of what's left. Do you ever find yourself longing for the past instead of embracing the present? What's something new you've tried that brought you unexpected joy? Let's talk in the comments. What's one thing you can do today to make the most of life? I'm listening. Aging gracefully isn't about chasing youth. It's about staying engaged, connected, and valued. It's about growing wiser, not just older. Life continues to offer opportunities for joy, learning, and deep relationships if we choose to embrace them. By being mindful of these 9 behaviors, we can maintain dignity, strengthen our connections, and create a life that is just as fulfilling today as it was in the past. But now, I want to hear from you. Which of these habits do you think is the most important to work on? Have you noticed any of these patterns in yourself or others? Let's have a conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video valuable, consider subscribing to join a community that embraces aging with wisdom and grace. A simple like and share can help more people discover these insights. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep living.